I know you guys are tired of hearing me talk about Jalen Waddle, but we're going to break it down at the wide receiver positions for the Broncos. I'm going to make my final case for how this team is going to play out from the video I made explaining the wide receiver positions. If you recall, or if you watched it, go back and watch it. I showed you this fun little graphic showing 11 personnel with an X receiver, a Z flanker, and a Y slot. And I produced this little graph showing you the archetypes of what size and speed makes up each X, Y, and Z receiver. And we are going to apply that now to the Denver Broncos to show how you're going to have league-winning upside with Jalen Waddle and how to shake out the rest of this receiver. So starting with Waddle, 5'9", 180, 4.43 40-yard dash. He truly fits perfectly into the Z receiver archetype. A little short, a little light, but in the modern NFL, 5'9", 180 can play flanker and it can play slot. Now, we don't have any short area testing to necessarily know if Jalen Waddle is great in the slot, but we do have 1,000 yards and 140 targets as a rookie in 2021. And if you look in 2021, we see a guy who ran 379 slot snaps that year, 15th in the NFL. Now you might say, hey, let's look at other years like 2023. Why didn't he run in the slot that year? That's because Tyreek Hill was on the team. And when you have Tyreek Hill on your team, one of the best receivers ever, you're going to let Tyreek Hill play flanker and you're going to let Tyreek Hill play slot. So again, you look at what Jalen Waddle did. Let's just look at 2025, nothing in the slot. He's lining up outside. They're playing him at X because they need to put someone at X. And if you look at my fun little graph, Jalen Waddle is not built to be an X receiver, right? Look at the size, 5'9", 180. Now he's so talented and so good at playing wide receiver that even though he's out of position at X and he's on a terrible Dolphins team, he still posts 100 targets and 910 yards and 6 touchdowns in 16 games, having the ball thrown to him by Tua and a bunch of no one behind Tua. He now goes to Denver, and this is huge, because he can now be the slot flanker he was meant to be. The slot flanker that as a rookie posted 140 targets, and the guy that even out of position posted 23% targets in 2025. If you look at 2023, 23% targets. If you look at 2024, only 16%, but he was hurt. If you look at 2022, 21%. This is all sharing the field with Hill. 24% as a rookie. Never really got the chance to be the star that he is. Now let's look at Courtland Sutton, 6'3", 218. Right? Pull up the graph. He's right in the X receiver range, 6'3", 218 with marginal athleticism. That is the perfect X receiver if I've ever seen one. And that is a guy that can only play X receiver. His agility is nice and his speed is nice, but his long speed is not necessarily impressive. And he's big. 6'3", 218. This isn't necessarily the kind of guy that plays the slot. And we see that flesh out because he doesn't play the slot. 152 slot snaps last year, right? He doesn't go in the slot. Sean Payton doesn't put him in the slot. 135 slot snaps the year before. Now, Courtland Sutton is good, but 21.6% target share last year, sharing the field with Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, and Marvin Mims. That's not a very aggressive target earner. He's a good player, but yards per out run was only 1.73. First downs per out run was only 0.08. Both of those are outside the top 30. You know, he's a nice player. I like Courtland Sutton. 12 and 14 PPR points per game the last 2 years. He's just gotten over the 1,000-yard receiving hump with Sean Payton. He's good for 6 to 10 touchdowns, but 135 and 124 targets as the lead receiver on a very productive offense. This is a guy that's good, but not great. He goes in the 8th round, and that's fine. But he's not going to keep Waddle from exceeding and succeeding as a slot flanker. But he actually helps Waddle because now Waddle never needs to see the X position. Courtland Sutton is going to be glued to the X position. Waddle gets to stay as slot flanker, and Troy Franklin just gets relegated to more of a secondary role where he probably should have always been. Now, it's weird that people see Troy Franklin as this amazing player, and I understand he produced last year, but if we look at the graph, 6'2", 176, that's a weird size. Right now, he might not weigh 176 anymore, so let's just give him benefit of the doubt. Say he's 180, but he's taller and he's lighter. To be 180 and 6'2", you're going to be a flanker, and he does run a 4.41, and he does have burst, so he certainly is in the slot flanker archetype, right? But he's just okay. he hasn't shown us enough to think that he's going to really push Jalen Waddle for snaps. He had 100 targets last year, only 700 yards, 10 fantasy points per game on 100 targets is not super encouraging. He had 283 slot snaps, and they were in desperate need of a slot receiver with Evan Engram getting offseason injuries and not firing, and their next best option was Pat Bryant, who was a rookie. He was 5th in deep targets, but he was also 10th in design target share. He was 4th in design targets in the league on a team that was 5th in team pass plays per game, and his advanced metrics are really just not there at all. 1.47 yards per out run, 0.069 first downs per out run, the two most important stats. Did not do well at all. I liked Troy Franklin coming out. His college production that junior year at Oregon was definitely nice. 1,300 yards, 14 receiving touchdowns. But he's still a young guy. To a degree, he's still developing. He's 23.4 years old. They propped him into this primary role, and it only really worked when the production was designed for him by Sean Payton's play call, because he is an athletic guy that can catch the football. It's not the case anymore for Troy Franklin. All of those design touches, all of that role goes to Jalen Waddle, who's their versatile player, who's going to be a slot flanker. And just for funsies, we'll look at Pat Bryant. 6'2", 204 with burst, right? You put him on this graph, it doesn't really fit anywhere. 6'2", 204 would be flanker, but he has no long speed. He has short area speed for a slot, and a slot can be any size, but he's not necessarily heavy enough to be an X receiver, right? So we look at maybe what he did last year, and 250 slot snaps for a part-time player is a lot of slot snaps. So they're playing him as a slot receiver. Didn't really produce much, 49 targets, 378 yards, part-time player and a rookie, but this is not an exciting profile. A weirdly big but light with only okay burst player out of the slot with no long speed. So is he really going to crush deep crossers? Is he really a finesse route runner? We can look at his college profile. Never had 1,000 yards, only one season over 20% target share at Illinois. No versatility on special teams. This is just a guy. He's not getting in the way. I'm not even going to show you Marvin Mims, because Marvin Mims is just running wind sprints. So this is why when you take the time to really understand these wide receiver positions, X, flanker, slot, and the archetypes of what makes this up, and then you look at this Jalen Waddle career and acquisition, and you look at Bo Nix's ability to get the ball to his receivers, you look at Sean Payton's coaching ability, you start projecting out the Broncos, you go, oh my God, Jalen Waddle's going to be really good. Jalen Waddle's going to be in the best position you want for fantasy football scoring. He's going to get slot snaps, which is layups, which is a lot of volume, and then he's going to get flanker snaps. So he's going to get these big plays, these Brian Thomas Jr. 50-yard deep crosser routes, this Tyreek Hill role that Tyreek had on Miami the last 4 years. And he's going to get to be committed to what he's good at, because Courtland Sutton is going to be good enough to play the X receiver role where you don't want Jalen Waddle playing. So Courtland Sutton can certainly still produce nearly 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns and be the fantasy football wide receiver 24, and that's not going to stop Jalen Waddle from building on all this production throughout his career. A career of 15 fantasy points per game. He might get 17 fantasy points per game. He's not going to be top 6. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson, but he's probably going to be top 10. At least there's a clear path to top 10. And the floor where you're getting him in the 4th round, he's definitely crushing the floor. So it's a great pick. It's good to understand these wide receiver positions.